Hello everybody, welcome back to Steven's Fight Show. Now in this video we're going to be discussing about the recent fight that happened between Joe Joyce and Joseph Parker. It was a great fight between both fighters, both guys showed up to win, but ultimately it was one person who was able to execute their game plan to the level that they wanted to, and it was Joe Joyce. I felt like this fight was a fight to bring in somebody new to the top of the heavyweight division. I felt like for the longest time, the whole boxing world was focused on the top of the heavyweight division. I feel like people were too focused on Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua, Alexander Usyk. And because of those guys, I don't think the guys who are below them deserved a lot of recognition. But since this win from Joe Joyce, he has definitely earned his name to potentially being one of the best in the heavyweight division right now. And there's so many talks about who he's gonna fight next, so let's cover them all right now. Okay, so first off, let's talk about the fight. The fight started off pretty well for both fighters. I mean, Joe Joyce was coming forward, establishing the jab, and Joseph Parker was attacking the body. And both guys, you can tell they were getting a feel for each other, and they were trying to see who was going to fall into each other's game plan, and who's gonna fight the other person's fight. And after about 4 rounds, you can see who was having more success with their game plan, and it was Joe Joyce. Joyce was applying smart pressure to walk down Joseph Parker, and when he got him up against the ropes, he wouldn't rush. But instead, what he would do was he would use the jab to measure range first, and then he would open up. A lot of times when you see fighters that have other fighters up against the ropes, you would see them opening up too much, throwing hard shots, not setting up any punches, not finding their distance, and instead it becomes a wasted opportunity. But for Joyce, he was very smart on how he was breaking down Joseph Parker up against the ropes. The jab was money for Joe Joyce, but the shots that he was putting behind the jab was great, along with the counter check hook off the opposing jab as well. Every single time Joseph Parker would throw a jab, Joe Joyce would try to counter with a lead hook, and the counter work by Joe Joyce was brilliant. Whenever Parker would attack the body, which he did a lot in this fight, he would constantly get countered with hooks and uppercuts and body shots as well from Joe Joyce. And even though Joe Joyce was having a lot of success with the jab, the pressure, the body work, the counter work, etc., I did feel like Joe Joyce was a bit lazy at times because although he was the aggressor, I don't think he was the faster fighter. I felt like Joseph Parker was the faster fighter. And there were times where Joe Joyce would get caught with a lot of shots over the top, even in rounds where Joe Joyce was winning, like a lot of crosses, a lot of overhands from Joseph Parker. And I understand that they're heavyweights and they're not going to be as quick and as sharp as lightweights, welterweights, flyweights, etc. Fatigue is definitely going to be a factor. Weight is going to be a factor. Yes, I understand all of that. But I would just like to see him be a bit more disciplined and alert in his defense, because if that was somebody like AJ or Wilder who could potentially be an opponent for him in the future, if they were to land a shot over the top, then things could take a turn for the worse. Joseph Parker, he was working the body really well in the early rounds and actually landed a lot of good jabs and right hands. But ultimately, I felt like he was too comfortable with giving too much ground to Joe Joyce. And when you're fighting somebody who's a pressure fighter, if you allow a pressure fighter to come forward without having an answer, then it will be a long night for you. I felt like if Parker used his jab a bit more and threw more combinations, then he could have had a better chance to win this fight. And if you actually look at a few moments during the fight where Parker would double up on the jab, or he would throw 2 or 3 left hooks behind the right hand, he was actually able to get Joyce to move back and reset. And if he would have done more of it, who knows what could have happened. But at the same time, for Parker to keep that pace and activity against Joe Joyce, that would be extremely exhausting, because Joe Joyce has a dangerous gas tank for a heavyweight. During the middle rounds when Joe Joyce was starting to break Joseph Parker down and started to pull away on the scorecards, his pace and activity was unreal. And again, the dude might not be the most fast twitch heavyweight in the world, but he can definitely fight for 12 straight rounds with constant pressure and activity. And if you actually notice, if you look at the way he throws his punches, it's also hard for him to get tired because the punches that he throws are not hard shots. If you watch fighters who throw a lot of big punches, if they were to miss or if they don't land clean, people have to remember that that takes a lot out of you. To throw a punch and it doesn't land, and especially if you miss completely, that's almost like you sprinting for 2 seconds for no reason. And if you look at Joe Joyce's punches, he wasn't really sitting down on them, and therefore it allows him to continue to increase his output. Overall, it was a good fight from Joe Joyce. It was a brilliant finish as well, the way he caught him with the left hook. And don't forget all the work that he had put in before that shot as well. Again, with the pace, the pressure, it really wears you down. And eventually all the volume starts to add up, and in the later rounds when you have nothing left, one shot can just take you out. And if you're in the heavyweight division, it doesn't make it any better as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Joe Joyce's career, and I want to discuss about him being underrated in the division. Like I said again, Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, AJ, and Usyk, those are pretty much the 4 guys at the top right now that everybody focuses on. And because they've had countless fights against each other, like Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder, people might have forgotten this, but the first fight took place in 2018. The third fight took place in 2021. That whole rivalry took up 3 years in the heavyweight division. And same with AJ and Usyk. They fought in 2021 and had a rematch a year later. All of these fights have held up the heavyweight division for so long, and because they've held it up for so long, people haven't really been paying attention to any other heavyweight in the division. And during that time when Fury, Wilder, and AJ and Usyk would go at it, Joe Joyce was the sleeper in the heavyweight division for the last few years. And Joe Joyce, he's always been hanging and chilling around the top 5, but with this win against Joseph Parker, I think he will get his shot to cracking the top 5. And if we talk about the top 5, I'm pretty sure there's only 5 guys that we're thinking about. Again, Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk, Deontay Wilder, AJ, and Andy Ruiz Jr. And going back to Joe Joyce's performance, in my opinion, his performance wasn't great, but it was definitely good enough considering the people that Parker has beaten and faced. And with the names that Joe Joyce has beaten on his resume like Daniel Dubois, Brian Jennings, Carlos Takam, these guys are not the best guys out there, but they're definitely legit and credible. And especially in those fights, the way that Joe Joyce was able to perform and beat those guys, I think we can get a clear understanding of where he ranks among the top heavyweights. And his skills at this stage in his career, where he's 37 and only started boxing late at 22, is just incredible. A fighter that is not the quickest, not the fastest, not the most powerful, but utilizes what he's good at, which is ring IQ, cardio, and smart pressure. In my opinion, he doesn't necessarily have the same attributes as an Anthony Joshua, or a Tyson Fury, or a Deontay Wilder. But that's okay because Joe Joyce is his own fighter and he uses what he's good at. It shows that boxing isn't all about size and power and strength. If you have good cardio, if you have good ring IQ, and if you have good fundamentals, then it could take you somewhere. Joe Joyce is a fighter that thinks in the ring, and the thing about him is that he never allows himself to lose focus on the task at hand. So now, since Joe Joyce has had an incredible KO win against Joseph Parker, along with his skills as a heavyweight, the question is, who should we see him fight next? And that leads into our next topic, which is the potential matchups. Fans are calling for so many different fights like Joe Joyce versus AJ, Wilder, maybe Fury, but Joe Joyce, he has his sights set on the current unified heavyweight champion, Usyk. A little backstory, if people don't remember, Joe Joyce and Usyk actually fought in the amateurs, where Usyk was able to get a unanimous decision win against Joe Joyce, and Joyce wants to run it back again in the pro game. In my opinion, I think Joe Joyce could compete against Usyk, but I don't think he would win. Joe Joyce versus AJ is another fight that could make sense. In my opinion, it would be a hard fight for AJ because of what Joe Joyce possesses. He has a good jab, incredible pacing, intelligent pressure, and a good gas tank. In AJ, he might be the faster and stronger fighter and even a better athlete, but the abilities that Joe Joyce presents are things that AJ struggles with. And I think AJ could certainly beat Joe Joyce with his size, speed, and power, but there's also a good chance that Joe Joyce could outpace, outwork, and outbox AJ. Joe Joyce versus Deontay Wilder would be a good fight as well, because Joe Joyce in his entire career has never seen a dangerous power threat like Wilder. But in my personal opinion, I think Joe Joyce versus Andy Ruiz Jr. would be a good fight. I think both guys stylistically would put up a good fight. Andy Ruiz Jr., he likes to come forward, he likes to throw combinations, he also has quick hands. A lot of people would say he has the quickest hands in the division, and he has power that can drop pretty much anybody in the heavyweight division. In his last fight against Luis Ortiz, he had like 3 knockdowns, which is insane. And I understand that Luis Ortiz, he's at the end of his career, but at the same time, to drop a guy like him 3 times, it's not easy. I certainly believe that Ruiz would bring a lot out of Joe Joyce, and Joe Joyce would bring a lot out of Ruiz in terms of boxing ability, conditioning, and intelligence. And Ruiz, he also has desire to become champion once again. And since his last defeat against AJ, if I'm being honest, I haven't really been too impressed with the fights that he's been a part of. Andy Ruiz Jr., he fought Chris Arreola back in May of last year, I believe. And he's fought Luis Ortiz about a month ago. And in those fights, he hasn't looked great. I thought in his last fight, it shouldn't have gone to a decision. I felt like the fight between him and Ortiz was too close due to his inactivity, due to him being too tentative, and I felt like there was a lot of things that he should have done to get the job done easier. But still, the goal remains the same for Andy Ruiz, and it's that he wants to become champion again. And I think for Ruiz to reclaim a shot at the titles, fighting Joe Joyce and potentially beating him would be big on his resume, and it would certainly help him get closer to the titles. And that is it, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to what I have to say, and let me know, who do you personally want to see Joe Joyce fight next? Do you think Joe Joyce could become a world champion at heavyweight? Drop a comment and let me know in the comment section down below. Now, if you guys enjoy content that is related to combat sports, please drop a like on this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would be greatly appreciated. And other than that, it's been Steven, signing out. Peace.